Today on Joe Public Speaking, I'm talking with Greg Allen, who is a musician originally from Rhode Island, but he's played all over the Northeast and elsewhere, some other countries. He was in England for a while. And Greg has long been a songwriter, guitar player, and frontman for the various bands that he's been involved with. Still going strong today, at least prior to the COVID-19 shutting everything down. His band was still playing live gigs, and I have heard that right now they are in the process of recording a number of new songs. So we'll be hearing one of those during the podcast, and also hearing about Greg's various experiences from the past, which include working with a number of former New York Dolls members and also musicians who had also worked with the Dolls or with former Dolls members. So, Greg Allen, welcome to Joe Public Speaking.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.
So, I think let's go first of all, and then we're going to jump back in time after this. But I'm really excited to hear that you have been recording some new material over the last, a few weeks or so. And can you tell us a little bit about that? What inspired this? Was it anything to do with the shutdown? And how's it going?
So far, it's going good. It's great, actually. We have our guitar player, Corey's really good with his Pro Tools stuff. And we initially just started rehearsing again about 2 months ago with masks on and just going through the set, but that was really boring. And so, he suggested maybe we should record some stuff, which we've been doing. And we've got like 2 or 3 tunes that we've been working on, and we're probably going to do a number of them. I'd like to do 12 or 15 songs and maybe see if we can do an album, because the sound quality is really good. He does a great job with all this. I guess it was sort of why rehearse the band set when you're not going to be playing anywhere anytime soon, So, due to that, we were like, well, what's the point of going through the set and tightening it up and, not playing till 20, 2 years down the road or something. So we figured this would be the best way to approach it. And so far it sounds good.
And speaking of that new music that Greg was just talking about, we're going to take a little break for just a couple of minutes because he and his band Fringe Religion were kind enough to give us a demo of one of the new songs. So this one is called I Need a Facelift.
He can do. That motherfucker needs a facelift too. I need a facelift. I need a facelift. I need a facelift. I need a facelift. Handing down the plastic and burning with a shovel. You gotta pass the change your body's one big bubble.
So there's really no bars. So you now live in the Boston area. There's no Boston area bars that are open and booking bands at all at this point.
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
No, I mean people are doing like porch fests and stuff like that. And that online stuff where some guy's going to play his acoustic guitar for you at 6 o'clock on Friday. But I mean that's cool for a while. I thought about doing it myself, then I figured I don't know. I mean, I missed the camera. Here I am with my acoustic guitar, and and some people do a great job with it. I don't know if
Yeah.
I'd be able to pull it off. I guess I could, but there's something weird about it. I don't know. I mean, it's good for some people.
Yeah. Um, so now we're gonna look back in terms of how you got started in music in the first place. What inspired you to pick up a guitar and start your first band?
Well, it goes back quite a while. I was a drummer when I was a young kid, and there's an army brat neighbor that lived down the street. And he taught me how to play drums a little bit, and he turned me on to like the MC5 when I was like 10 years old. Maybe 10 or 11, we go out and smoke catnip in his barn. More like a little, I don't know, it was
Nice.
like a shed. He's like, check this out,
Uh-huh.
catnip. I'm like, what the fuck? So, we got a headache, and then we'd listen to Kick Out the Jams. So it was like a perfect day. You go into like those,
Right.
you go smoke catnip with this hippie in the shed. Then you go into his house and play loud drums horribly and listen to Kick Out the Jams. So that's when things started going a little bit weird for me. Then I got into I was really into the Rolling Stones. My mom would get me Rolling Stones records and Brian Jones, the way he looked, because I thought he looked really cool. I guess Anita Pallenberg would dress all the band, And I just thought, wow, that's, back, this is like late 60s, and everybody had record collections. Everybody was listening, buying vinyl. And so I played the drums and I had a few garage bands. And then I wanted to play the guitar because I saw the New York Dolls on television. My mother said, "Oh, you have to see this band." This was in '73. And I'd read about them and I saw them. I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to be a guitar player. So I put a band together around the same time. This is suburban Rhode Island in like early '70s, called Raggedy Ann, because that's how desperately we wanted to be like the Dolls. Me more than the rest of the guys. I persuaded them to be as stupid as I was, And we had this bass player named Dwarf, and we made 2x4 platform shoes for him out of wood, and we wrapped the shoes in like a silver duct tape and wrapped Christmas lights around him and plugged them into the wall. So he was like about 2 feet off the ground, literally, and flashing on and off like a Christmas tree when we did our first gig. And so we played at a high school gym, and it was a Christmas thing, Raggedy Ann. We did all original music. I had a stack of Sound City amps. And we tried to dress like the Dolls, but we're little kids, we're like 15, 16 years old. And people were just fucking freaked out. We're like, what is this? And we got the Dwarf guy, the bass player. There he is, around Christmas time, mind you, plugged into the wall with the Christmas trees wrapped around his shoes, being 2 or 3 feet up in the air, right? Silver platform. They weren't platform. They're like Quaalude from the Tubes. They made those shoes look like slippers. That's
I
how high it
remember
was.
those. Yeah.
You remember like Quaalude would do that thing, he comes out and had white punks on dope in the Tubes. This was prior to that. Not that we were innovators. We were just idiots. And so, that would go on. And I think we lasted like one song, and they were just horrified, and it was, I had a stack of amps, a 130 watt head in this, people holding their ears and like, sonic torture from the word go. But it was a lot of fun. So that inspired me to, bring on more stupidity. And so I put another band together. I had a bunch of bands. Actually, I was in a couple cover bands too. After that, I was in a cover band that was called Smoke. And it was pretty bad. We had this singer, we found him in a bowling alley. He was like this disco guy, and with a terrible complexion and this kind of crazy mustache and that kind of pubic hair. It wasn't like it was almost like pubic hair glued to his head. And the first gig we played was at this Jewish community center on the east side of Providence, I remember. And he'd sing like he was an Italian guy, you know, and we were doing like Led Zeppelin covers, and he'd be like, "Oh, whole lotta love," you know. We're like, "What?" You know, like, you know, toys and yatakik, you know,
Ugh.
train kept a rolling, you know, like
Oh man.
wow, it was psycho. So you know, and that didn't work out, and you know, and then I was back to putting Blue Ruin together, I guess, which took a while to get the you know the guys, the right guys for the band.
Yeah. Well, and um, that's actually where I uh, first got to know you long ago, in the days when Blue Ruin was sometimes headlining, sometimes opening for sort of big acts or whatever that were national acts coming around the area in Rhode Island, and you were playing. You were playing really the couple of biggest rooms, the most popular rooms at the time. One being the living room, and the other Lupo's Heartbreak Hotel. So take
Yeah.
us back to those glorious days back in the early to mid '80s or so, and what. Tell us a few of your fondest stories from that time.
Well, um, we had the opportunity to open for some pretty big acts like Johnny Winter and Blue Cheer and Nazareth and Johnny Thunders a few times, and we played with Robin Lane and the Chartbusters, a whole bunch of Rick Derringer, because these two girls, the Vodolato sisters, are really nice people, and they kind of got us in there with Randy and got us, oh, these guys will be okay with this band and that band, so they helped out quite a bit. Um, it wasn't all that glamorous. I mean, I remember doing some packed shows with like 1,000 people and getting, $50 or $25 and a bunch of beer. But when you're that young, you don't care. And it was a great opportunity, for the exposure alone. Um, I think our first gig, we had our drummer's sister had a boyfriend who was a big DJ on WPRO FM, and asked us if we wanted to play at this college. I think it may have been Rhode Island College or Bryant. And we said, sure, would love to do it. And where have you played before? Oh, we played everywhere, lying. We were like, we played, down at Chuckleman's 5 down in, Attleboro, Massachusetts. Like, well, I never heard of them. Well, you'll hear of it. Never heard of that club, So we lied. We said, we've been playing and we hadn't played at all. And, we were pretty under rehearsed and we had just gotten a new bass player. And we had the show opening for this band from New York whose name escapes me, and it was packed with, it was going to be packed with a bunch of college kids. And so we had a sound check that afternoon. It was a 5-piece band then. Freddie Carmela was the singer. I was just the guitar player. And this was, I believe, the first incarnation of Blue Ruin, which incidentally means it's a slang term for drunk white boys in a ghetto neighborhood. That's how we decided on the name. Nobody liked it. That's okay. So we were doing the sound check at 4 p.m. for this big show. And, and we'd obviously, from what they understood, played a whole bunch of shows in the past, but we didn't. We were lying. And so they rolled in a bunch of beer around 4 o'clock. The show we weren't slated to go on until like around 9. So the bass player and I went out to McDonald's or someplace to get something to eat. And when we came back at around 4:35 in the afternoon, the whole band and our light guy and sound guy were drunk out of their minds, like blind drunk. And this is 3 hours before we're going to play. We couldn't find the singer. The singer had disappeared. They found him in Cranston, Rhode Island, locked in the brewery the night before, apparently, locked with some policeman's wife. It was just unbelievable. I guess he was on acid too, because we couldn't find him. Then me and a couple of the drunk crew members went to find him at his house, and he didn't recognize us. It's a problem when you have a show and the singer in the band doesn't know who you are and you're in the band with him.
Yeah.
That was a little edgy there, because we're knocking on the doors like, who are you guys? Like, this could be trouble. So apparently he was on acid. He'd been up for a few days drinking, didn't recognize us band members, and were fully unaware that we had a show scheduled. We put him in the car, drove him to the show. He sat at the bar. things went from bad to worse. We by the time we hit the stage at 9 o'clock, everybody was plastered. I mean, mindlessly, just basically mentally retarded. Like the drummer was hitting air instead of cymbals. He just hit like air, like whoosh, like not even close to the cymbal with a stick. You know what I mean?
Uh,
And you go, yeah, it was bad. The other guitar player would get on this little drum rise, maybe 6 inches high, and jump down like he did something like, like check it out. And it was horrible. And then, like I heard this Freddie, the singer, he was making up words like Billy's got a haircut, like stuff that doesn't make any sense. Like what songs he's saying, nobody knows. And we'd hear like through the monitors, the soundman would hear, "Okay, Chuck, we're ready." I'm like, "There's no Chuck in the band. What's going on?" He's like, "Okay, Miguel, you do this." I'm like, "What is it? There's no Miguel in the band, no Chuck in the band." The singer was just making up words. It was horrible. And the guy who booked the show, the DJ, I remember them holding him back, like, some of his crew or something were holding him back because he was like, physically going to attack the stage and kill us. I can't blame him. But I mean, for the comedy factor alone, I guess I probably would have enjoyed that show from, outsider's point of view. But anyway, so we played. And then I punched the guitar player because he was drunk and he fell down the stairs. And it was pretty Clod-worthy. It was perhaps the most pretty embarrassing and stupid. You will never play here again. You will never play anywhere ever again, that kind of thing. We fired the singer. I remember seeing the follow spot, the big trooper light that comes onto the stage, like, here's Liza Minnelli, or, here's Liberace with a big trooper. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So that trooper, this light guy was drunk out of his mind. I remember seeing him up there and just seeing like these shadows of Budweiser bottles going backwards. And then I remember the trooper light coming at me, like this huge, gigantic trooper light, like, he is here, Wayne Newton, And then it turns from this huge trooper light to this dot on my forehead, and then goes boom, right to the ceiling. And I look up, and there he is, like unconscious, like the head cut backwards, hanging over the chair, the trooper light on the ceiling, this huge, massive light, not even close to the band, just on the ceiling. And audience members 50 yards away, from the stage, just puzzled and just disgusted. And, we were the opening act, and, another band had to go on and follow us. And we got out of there pretty quick,
Uh-huh.
That wasn't a successful show. However, after that, we got better and started doing shows where people sort of liked us. And, we played at Lupo's, and we played it all around Providence. We came and played the Rat a few times. And eventually we got up to Jersey and New York and stuff later on. And, Blue Ruin was a interesting band, to say the least.
In hindsight, which bands or individual musicians would you say were probably the biggest influences on Blue Ruin?
Collectively, or just by me, like what I thought?
Well, I mean, you were the songwriter and the front man. So how about just you?
Well, I mean, I listened just the stuff I grew up listening to, like I said before, the Rolling Stones, or the MC5, the Dolls, the Stooges, early Aerosmith. I loved early Aerosmith. The Kinks. I mean, I grew up with that kind of stuff. I was never a big Doors fan, or I never really liked the Animals that much, but I liked the British rock stuff. And unfortunately, I knew some older kids in the neighborhood turned me on to some more hip stuff than, what was being played on the radio at that time, So, yeah.
So then, after that time you've just been talking about with Blue Ruin, playing mostly Rhode Island, but then, as you said, you spread out into some other northeastern states and cities, and then you decided to make a move yourself down to New York City. What prompted that move, and then tell us about your time down there in New York.
Well, we'd pretty much run its course with the Blue Ruin thing. We've been playing for 2 or 3 years, and I always wanted to go to New York anyway because, I'd been reading about all the stuff, the cool stuff that was going on there with the bands in New York, like, the Ramones and the Velvet Underground were there, and of course the Dolls were there, and the Dictators, and it was like, that's where I really wanted to go. And as it turns out, my girlfriend at the time ditched me, and she moved to New York and lived with this girl who was in the B Girls, which was a pretty popular band around the time.
Mm.
Cynthia Ross was in it. They were great, actually. Kind of like Go-Go's kind of thing, but maybe a little heavier around that era. So she lived with her for a while. And then I figured, well, maybe I'll move there. And she's like, well, I'm going to be moving out of my place that she was living with Cynthia, and I'm moving into this hotel. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I could, because yeah, if you want to live with me for a while, that'd be fine. So I did. I moved into this welfare hotel on 17th Street. It was filled with derelicts and perverts and hookers and horrible. It was a pretty nice area. It was on 17th Street and Third, but it was filled with every creep you could possibly imagine. So, cockroaches. I remember one time drinking like a bottle of Budweiser, and I opened my mouth, and this bug about 3 inches long flew out of my mouth and right to the ceiling. Water bug, giant cockroach. It climbed into my beer while I was playing it was filthy, horrible.
Oh my God.
So I moved there because all the bands a good percentage of them that I really idolized or admired when I was younger were from there. And when you're early 20s, you figure, well, why not,
Yeah.
So I moved there, and shortly after the first time I moved there, I moved to England. So I was only there for about a year or so, and I got a job at Tower Records. And it was a great time. A very dangerous city at the time, but a lot of fun. And, after I moved out of the welfare hotel, I moved right into a porno studio. So that was cool too. Where she lived in, and it wasn't a porno studio at that time, but it had been in the past. And
Moving on up, huh?
yeah, I was, going places, but nowhere fast. But, it was a lot of fun.
So, all right. So this is in terms of the chronology. This is new to me. So you were there in New York for a while, then you went to London, and then you went back to New York. And tell us about
Yeah.
the times that you eventually wound up playing with, as I mentioned in the intro, some of the former members of the Dolls, and also other musicians who had played with the Dolls at different times.
Well, I had moved to New York. Blue Ribbon was still together. We did a couple shows, then the band sort of dissolved. I met this girl. She said, "Oh, I know these musicians in Brighton and London that are cool, and why don't you check it out?" So I stayed in New York for about a year. Then I moved to Brighton, actually, and lived there for a little while. Put a band together called the Vulture Squadron. We'd go back and forth every 6 months, 7 months, because I get kicked out of the country. And then, I had some gigs. The band was doing okay. That band was doing okay, the Vulture Squadron. And I went over to France to buy some more time. When I got back, when I was trying to go back on the bus, they took me off the bus and my girlfriend and went through all my stuff. And they're trying to deport me from Paris to New York. And I was there for 2 hours. And this is a funny little, my girlfriend at the time tells the guy that I robbed banks for a living. That's what I did. For the third, he kept saying, "Now tell us honestly, what do you do for a living?" And I said, "I work at this record store in Manhattan, blah, 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 blah." And she goes, "You know what?" He goes, "I'm going to tell you the truth." So, "All right, you tell us, miss." She's like, "He robs banks." That's when my face started sweating. And the guy laughed and stamped me back into England for like another 6 months. But so then I came back to New York again, and I started playing in a band. I put my own band together called the Jigsaw Men.
At some point, you started playing with Jerry Nolan.
I played in a band, done some stuff with Johnny Rayo from David Johansen's band. He was a fantastic guitarist and great songwriter. And we've tried a few things and done some recording. And then I put a band together with my friend JF, who was in Walter Lur's band, and called the Whores of Venice. I don't know who came up with that name. Another, girls are going to love this. So Jerry and Syl had a band called the Ugly Americans, and they play at this club called the Continental on 3rd Avenue, Manhattan. And so we'd go watch them, because they were great, And so finally, one of us asked if we could open for them, and they said, sure. So we opened for Syl's band. Jerry Nolan played drums, and they had Bernie playing guitar, and it's pretty cool. And then we did another show with them. We did 2 or 3, and I'd see Jerry once in a while and say, "Hey, how you doing?" He's always really friendly and nice. And then I heard Jerry quit the band or something, and I was walking by my apartment one day, going in on, I think it was on 12th Street. I see Jerry, and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "Hey, what's up?" And we talked for a while, and he hung out. And he goes, I really like your band and stuff. He goes, what are you doing now? And I said, well, we got a couple more gigs. He goes, well, let me know. So we did a gig down at the Hell's Angels bar, which is called the name escapes, Lismar Lounge, really run by the Angels. We played there, and Jerry came down with Buddy Bowser, who is Jerry's best friend. He played on the first Dolls album. He's a sax player. And they checked out the set. And Jerry's like, yeah, we should do something. And so I said, yeah, sure, So time went on. I'd see Jerry, we'd hang out, and I got an apartment on First Avenue and First Street, and he hung out there quite a bit. And then he was living in Staten Island, and he kind of sort of moved in to my apartment for a while, which was fine. And I was going to do a demo because I got a little bit of money to do a demo tape, and going to have this drummer in Boston play on it. And I was on the phone talking to the drummer, and Jerry was there. I said, all right, come down here. I was going to go up there, and we're going to do some recording. And I put the phone down. Jerry looked at me and said, what's up? And I said, I'm going to do some recording. And I don't know whether we're going to do it in Boston. We're going to do it here. He said, oh. He said, yeah, you got a drummer? And I said, yeah. He goes, well, why didn't you ask me? And I said, I never thought you'd be interested. Because I told you I love the music. I want to play, It's a little different from the interview that he does on MTV. He said, so, he changed things a little bit. But in fact, I didn't ask him because I didn't think he'd be interested, or, he'd want a whole bunch of money or something, So he said, no, I'll do it. Let me play. And I said, sure, love to. And so we started recording some stuff. A studio called Baby Monster. We got through like 5 or 6 songs. And then he started getting sick. I don't know. He just didn't feel well. And we planned to do a whole record, planned to go, he knew some people in Australia and Japan that were going to help him out. We planned to go over there. But then I came back. I had to see my dad in Rhode Island. So I came back, and his girlfriend called me and said he was in the hospital in a coma. So I went back to New York, and sure enough, I went to visit him a few times. It was really horrible. I think he recognized me, but it was really bad. And then he died. And so I didn't do anything with the recordings for years because I didn't know what to do with them. And I had Night Bob, really good guerrilla producer, sound man from everybody from Aerosmith to Kiss to blah, blah, blah. Mixed a couple songs for me, and I thought, hey, they sound pretty good. So then I figured, well, I got a little bit of money. Maybe let's try to put it out as just a document, because I was sick of people saying, oh, yeah, sure, you played with Jerry. And I'm like, I did, really? And it's like, well, what did you do? And I said, well, we did a record, but it didn't come out. And it's like, yeah, sure, whatever. I figured, nobody believed me, really, And then when I got to Boston, it was even worse. I was like, yeah, I just played with these guys. And, sure, you did. So I said, I'm just going to put this out anyway, And then at the same time, somebody put out a video of Jerry on MTV talking about putting a band together with me and a couple other guys, which kind of legitimized the situation, Yeah. You kind of look like a pathological liar. It's like, you coming up and like, I was in Rod Stewart's band for like 6 years. Like, where can we find this information? You can't, because Rod won't tell you, Rod's not going to pass that kind of information on you. You look like a nut. So I put it out as a document to him too. I didn't put it out because it was like, oh, what a brilliant performance. But we made, well, first of all, let me tell you about the tapes. I had the tapes in a coffin, the master tapes for the recording in a coffin in my apartment in Long Island City. And they were there for years. So when we decided to make a record out of this or salvage whatever we had that was salvageable, if you put the tapes on the reel, you could only play them once, then they demagnetized because they were so old and such bad shape. So we had to take the tapes and literally, this place in Newport, Rhode Island did it, bake them in an oven. And they take the master tapes and they put them in an oven for like an hour. And it kind of tightens them up. And then they put them on the reels and they give them one pass, and then they bump it to Pro Tools. And then the tapes completely fall apart and can never be used again. So we were thinking, well, it's just as soon as we put them on the reels, we're never going to have anything anyway, so we might as well try it. And sure enough, we were able to capture like 4 or 5 songs before the tapes just fell apart, literally to dust, And so we brought them to Pro Tools, and we had some other people like Walter Lure from the Waldos play on it, Johnny Rayo play on it, and Buddy Bowser played on it. And we just put it together and put it out, and Bomp's distributing it now, Bomp Records. And we have another company in England called Kudos Limited, and they've got the digital version of it. A lot of people like it, I was a little apprehensive because it's pretty rough and tumble. It's not like, we went in and just recorded stuff, and and that was it. No big overdubs, because we didn't get that far with the recording since Jerry got sick. We put it
Yeah.
out, and it's available on 12-inch pink vinyl, and a lot of people like it. And it's very R&B. It's nothing like the Dolls.
Yeah.
It's nothing like the Heartbreakers. Just like rock and roll, I guess. It's hard to explain. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I like it. And,
Glad, thanks.
I think, I mean, I get what you're saying about that sort of rough and tumble aspect to it, but I think if anything, that just adds to it for me anyway. It's just got this sort of like grittiness and ballsiness about it that, I think it really works. And there's some good stuff there. It's a shame that what happened to Jerry and that there wasn't time to record more with you guys together. But
Yeah, I mean, I don't, who knows what would have happened, but there's a lot of people that I respect, and I was shocked that they really liked it. Particularly in New York, and we did a record release party there, and it had real good turnout. And a lot of these New York guys that have been around forever knew Jerry. Were like, "This is really good stuff," and I was like, I figured they'd say, "This is crap." I mean, would you record this in your basement, or your kitchen drunk one night? But I kind of like it because it is kind of, it is what it is. It's
where I was going to save the where can people find your music question until the end, but while we're on the subject of this recording with Jerry Nolan, where can they find that one? And if they want to check it out, are there some different websites where they can find it, or preferably purchase it?
They can buy it from Bomp Records, which is a great label. They distribute my records for me. Great people. Bomp Records online for the physical copies, the pink vinyl 12-inch, and for the digital stuff, all my stuff goes through Kudos Limited in London, which is a great label too, Danny Ryan's label. And so they can get all that stuff digitally. And there's actually an extra track that's available digitally that's not on the vinyl record. Can't remember which one it was, but I think it's maybe a remix of one of the tunes. I'm not sure. Go there. But all the stuff's available. My stuff is available physically through Bomp and digitally through Kudos.
So from there, well, actually, before we head out to other places like coming up here to Boston, there's one story that you've told me that I'd like you to tell, and I believe this happened while you were down in New York. At one point, you met Keith Richards.
Yeah, this girl from London had this magazine called Cheap Date, and it was bankrolled by Keith on different occasions, I guess. I don't know really, but Marlon, his son, I guess she suggested Marlon call me, Keith's son Marlon, about maybe working for the magazine because they were going to come to New York and try to launch it there. They'd done it in London. I guess they were pretty successful, and they wanted to come to New York to see how that would go. So Marlon called me and asked me if I'd be interested in writing for him, doing something in some capacity. But I said, I'm not really a writer. He said, well, Kara said, you could do something interesting. Maybe you could write some stories and stuff. Because a lot of musicians were writing for it, a lot of guys in English bands, younger guys. So all those guys were friends. And so they were all kind of, writing articles about stuff. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll try it out. And as it turned out, I'd hang out, I'd go to the parties that they'd have. And, I met Anita Pallenberg there and hung out with her a few times. Very nice, very funny, very interesting. That's Marlon's mom, obviously. I haven't seen these guys in years. So a few times he's like, oh, you should meet my dad. I'm like, yeah, but I'd like to meet, Keith. It's Keith. I said, sure, I'd love to, and but it was always inconvenient because at that time I lived in Long Island City, and I was working at this club called Sway from the Rolling Stones song. I don't know if the Stones had interest in it, but the guy who ran it, Mir Khan, was good friends with all those guys, and particularly Marlon and this guy Tarka Cordell. And so they'd all hang out together. And so a couple times he said, oh, my dad's here. Keith's here. I'd never call him his dad. I think refer to him as Keith always. And you come down. And I'm like, I can't, All right. Because I lived in Long Island City. It was a big drag. After I got out of work, I'd have to get on 2 trains and then come back again. And, So one night I was working there at the bar, which I was kind of like the day manager there. And I went downstairs to the basement, this filthy basement that was about 4 feet wide by about 50 yards long. My boss said, if you ever, when you're down in the basement, lock the door. If you want to have a beer, cigarette or something or whatever, don't let anybody in. If anybody comes into that basement, that's where all the money is, blah, blah, blah. I don't want anybody down there but you or the bar backs, the people that work there. Nobody has a key except for you and a couple other people. Fine. So it was about 2 a.m. and I was there and I went downstairs to drink a beer and smoke a cigarette. I remember exactly. I had a Corona and I had a Marlboro cigarette. I'm down there and smoking and drinking and I hear all the music upstairs. The place was packed and I'm just relaxing. And all of a sudden about, 40 feet away, I see the door open, I'm like, who the fuck is, nobody's supposed to. So I'm thinking, all right, well, if they come up to me, they better have or I'm just going to hit them. Because I was like, I'm going to get big trouble if some guy's trying to rip this shit off and I'm the only guy down here, And so closer and closer, and my back's towards looking at the wall. And like I said, the width is only about maybe a little over a yard, very narrow. And they had big rats down there. It was just awful. But, and I feel this tap on my shoulder and I turn around. As soon as I turn around, it's Keith and he takes his face and he puts it right like next to my nose. And he goes, who the fuck are you? And what the fuck are you doing down here? Like exactly what I should be saying.
Yeah.
That was kind of stunning, and he has one eye that's kind of lazy and one eye's looking like, and I'm like, what? This is mind blowing, And so he obviously was sent down there to bust my balls. You know what I mean? They gave the key. They go freak this kid, guy out. I was like, wow, that's because, who'd expect that? And I went like, I was just like stunned, like, and then he turned around directly, walked face first into the wall. And, he wasn't dry. And he just looked at me kind of like, whatever. And he had some, stuff with him. And he's like, sit down in here, the manager's office. And then a few minutes later, those guys like Marlon and a couple guys from the London Choir Boys came down there like, ha. I was like, Jesus. And then I went back to work. I was just working, and they're all sitting, hanging out. They're like, come on, hang out. And I got to work. So my boss came in the next day and said, what the fuck are you doing? And I said, nothing. He goes, why did you go back to work? You should have hung out. And, I said, I figured I have to work. You get paid. No, the idea was just to hang out the whole night. Like he was actually furious that I didn't hang out with them, but I didn't, what am I going to, oh boy, Trumpet Jack Flash was great. What do you say, tell me more about Sympathy for the Devil,
yeah, right.
Right. How much money do you make on those tours? What can you possibly say that's not going to be stupid, but so.
Especially after you've just been punked by him.
I'm sorry?
Especially after you've just been punked by him.
Right, exactly. So you don't know how to approach it, and I didn't want to be like that guy,
Yeah.
But I'd met him once or twice after that briefly, and I had met him once before, the day before Live Aid, because Lonnie Mack had come into the store at Tower Records and said, "Oh, Keith and Ronnie are playing tonight at the Lone Star Cafe. I'll put you on the guest list." And we went for that, and that was great. It was Lonnie Mack. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a blues guitar player. And he had Keith and Woody sat in the whole night and did these old blues tunes, and it was just great. And there were like 50 people in the club, and so we stayed for that. That was cool. But I haven't seen those guys in a long time, but that's my Keith story. I'm sticking by it.
Well, it's a good story. Interesting way to actually meet somebody like that, sort of guitar hero or whatever.
Sure.
But memorable.
Invited to his house a couple times for Thanksgiving. Because my girlfriend was pretty good friends with them, but she's like, oh, some other time I'll do it. Like, no, but we're invited to Thanksgiving. We should go. No, some other time. No big deal. And then another time it was like, oh, Keith's having this recording today at the Hit Factory in Midtown. And, if you want to pop around, you can. Marlon's going to be there. And I said, with who? Ronnie Spector. And he's just doing this. Like, I'm like, can we go? We have to go to this. And it's like,
Oh,
well,
just Ronnie Spector.
I've got a dentist appointment. It's like 4. So maybe if we get, no, that's like cancel. Like, take all your teeth out. I'll take them out. I'll take all your teeth out and we'll glue some fake ones back and, it'll be fun. Like, no, we shan't do that. I'm like, so I missed that, imagine being at the Hit Factory with him and Ronnie Spector recording. And then there was another time, possibly he has a house in the grill. Like, shall we go to his house in the grill? And like, yes, we shall. Let's go now. Let's get on the plane and go to the fucking house and hang out. And, like, no, perhaps we will not, Like, okay, thank you. Thank you for nothing. But, that was, but I get a great Night Bob story about Keith. If you have some time, we'll do it later, but it's a very funny one. But yes, yeah. Oh.
So from New York, then tell us how you went from there and then came back to New England, but rather than Rhode Island, into the Boston area.
My life is wreckage, isn't it? It's just one big mess. Here, there, everywhere, nothingness. What happened was I was in New York for a while, and then towards the end, I was working at clubs. I worked as a making stat sheets for racehorses. I did all these kind of crazy, shitty work that you didn't have to pay taxes for. I cleaned apartments in the East Village, did everything possibly could, every shitty job in the world I did. And then I got a job as an art handler. I had a couple of them. And I worked as an art handler in Manhattan, hanging Warhols for their reps would come and go, ooh, perhaps we'll give you 17 million. And they'll go, no, don't undercut me, this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, these people are garbage. So, all uptight. And then everybody I was working with, like Johnny Rayo actually was working with me for a little while. And then me and Johnny got fired. We only got hired working as art handlers because this guy knew that Johnny was play with Johansson, and then I had played with Jerry, and it was we knew nothing about art. Like, like Rock Hudson said, like, I know a guy named Art, like we knew nothing. So, but he hired us because of Johnny's reputation, by the fact that I played with Jerry. That's how shallow was that. And so we lasted a few weeks. Then he decided, no, they don't know anything about art. Fire them, And so we immediately kicked to the curb. And so I got another job as another art handler. Now I'm working with like 20-year-old kids. I'm like, fuck this. I can't do this anymore. I'm like 40, in my 40s, like living, no money, nothing. So I talked to my mom. I'd gotten arrested too. That was another big thing in upstate New York, because after I'd sublet my apartment after the club had closed, and I had this girl living there, and my buddy who was building houses up there said, oh, come up here, I'll pay you some money and you can work on the site with us. And then I got arrested and blah, blah, blah. Now it's like, fuck this. I just want to get the fuck out of here. So I talked to my mom. I said, I can't do anything. I'm useless. I went to the School for Visual Arts in Manhattan for a little while, but that lasted 5 minutes because of their night classes, and never would I want to ever show up and take classes at night. Anyway, long story short, she said, sure, if you want to go back to school here, you can stay at the house. So I, after I got out of that little legal fiasco, I went to school and got my, in Rhode Island, I got my paralegal degree and criminal justice degree. And so I figured I'll work for some crooked music lawyer. That'll be fun. And I didn't like working for law people. But anyway, so I had come up to see a show that a friend of mine was doing at a place called Johnny D's in Massachusetts, living in Rhode Island, having left New York 6 months, a year earlier. And there was this girl who was at the club, very attractive woman. I was like, oh, I'd been drinking, so an elephant would have looked attractive. But, as it turned out, my gamble was okay. And so I asked her out when we went out, and she came to visit, and we were together for about a year, and we decided to get married, and I got married. And so she'd been at Harvard. She's an artist, a great artist, Heather Stewart. And she had been working at Harvard the whole time. She's like, oh, why don't we stay here? And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And so, yeah, that's it. That's how I wound up in Boston, because I got married to my wife, and she was been at Harvard for a long time, didn't want to move, and had no desire. So I, let go of my sublet in New York City, in Long Island City. And I've been up here, and I put a few bands together here. And Actually, I joined a band called the Port Charles Quintet. It was like a '60s kind of cover band, but an excellent band for a while. Then I put together Fringe Religion
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago, and that's been going with the third lineup, I guess, for the band. Though.
Yeah. So we have Heather Stewart, artist Heather Stewart,
Yes.
rumored to be coming on the show sometime soon.
Oh, good.
And and she's to be thanked for getting you back into the Boston area.
Yes, and helped with that. Putting out that Jerry album wasn't cheap. It was like $1 trillion to do the printing, the pressing, and
Nice.
so she put up the cash and a few thousand and bucks at least. And
Yeah.
fortunately, we sold enough to get her all her money back plus some. So that's good.
Nice.
But
That is good.
how that's gonna work out.
Yeah. No, that is good to hear that, because of course that's one of the interesting things that, despite the wonderfulness of the internet and digital technology and all the wonderfulness that those things bring and have brought to us, there is still that issue, for musicians, and actually to a certain extent, for a while there anyway, for filmmakers as well, that it suddenly became very hard to make much money selling your music. And
Yeah, it's impossible for a lot of these people.
yeah. um, and then but I guess touring and so on can still help with that, but that's assuming that how many hundreds or thousands of bands are there out there that they just haven't reached that point where they're getting gigs, or they're not getting them on a regular basis, or whatever. So it just seems like a real struggle. But I mean, here you are all these years later, and you're still getting gigs and recording, and it's pretty damn amazing, frankly. And hearing these stories of people who you've connected with and worked with and so on is really cool to hear.
Thanks,
And
Tom. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's going to get worse for these poor guys that really count on playing gigs every night to eat. And now the
Yeah.
venues, because of this pandemic thing, are going to be taking a bigger cut out of the artists now. Apparently, like 10 or 20%, from what I just read. So that's going to suck even more, assuming that half of these venues will stay open in the next 6 months to a year. And we'll play anywhere. We'll play at 7-Eleven, a coffee house. It doesn't matter. I mean, we're not, solely relying on this income to, afford a lifestyle. But a lot of these people are going to be in really bad shape, unfortunately, or presently in bad shape, just due to the fact that everything's closed.
Yeah, it's a tough time. Going back to the recording, I know you wanted to write and record several songs. Do you have any idea when those of us who should be keeping an eye out might an eye and an ear out might be seeing some of that music out there, so we can check it out?
I'd like to think by this time next year that we probably have like a good 10, 15 songs down. But, it depends on how quickly we work. And I want to make this record really diverse, not like, the last couple of records really were cool and stuff. People like them. I sell records. I mean, not huge amounts of records, but, they'll go send us like 30 or 40 more of this or that, blah, 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 a few times a year. And that's cool.
Yeah.
I want to make this record more diverse, and some of the stuff's going to be completely different. The question being, yes, how long? I don't know. I kind of hope maybe get everything done within the next year, and I kind of want to look at it not with like surgical focus, but I kind of want to make sure that like it's not all samey. I want some diverse stuff going on with it, not intentionally, because I've got a lot of songs that are different just as a rule. So hopefully next year around this time we'll have something available, and you'll be the first to know. I'll send you a bunch of stuff, and so let me know what you think.
Nice. Greg, thank you so much for being so generous with your time, and all the best with the new recordings. I know that we've been talking about possible music video coming out of one of those recordings
Yes.
sometime in
By
the
all means.
future,
Yes, absolutely.
and I'm looking forward to that. So many thanks for talking with us today on Joe Public Speaking.
My pleasure, Tom. Always great speaking with you, and I hope to see you soon.
And playing us out this time, we have a recording of another Greg Allen song called Trouble on the Way. This version of the song, which was originally done by Blue Ruin, is off of the 2001 release by the Greg Allen Group, an album called Just For You. And this features Johnny Rayo on guitar. See you next time on Joe Public Speaking.
Chicago just the other day. A woman and my best friend took a plane and flew away, but now they're gone. Gone, 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 and I gotta say, anybody sees those two, tell him trouble's on the way. Last time that I saw those guys, it made me feel like a clown. I bought me a Smith & Wesson. Now I'm out to mow them down, and they'll be gone. Gone, 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 and I gotta say, anybody sees those two, tell him trouble's on the way. Street, stuck a gun right in their back. The fingers on the trigger, and I wasn't holding back. They'll be gone. Gone, 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 and I gotta say, anybody sees those two, tell him trouble's on the way.